One of the things that we talked about yesterday was the fact that one of the reasons that I could understand what was happening around me was not just the fact that I was in the rooms of those that were planning this, but also that I was actively involved both on the faith side of this in Christianity, but also on the corporate side of this in what would be corporate travel. And so when you're seeing it happen at all levels, you're beginning to understand what's actually happening here. And that it's everything, everywhere, all at once, right? Unlike that horrible movie that I tried to watch at one point. It's like, okay, well, this is, in line for the Oscars and so forth. And you watch like, what a mess this is. But it is everything, everywhere, all at once. And that's the only way that something like this can actually work, is that if it comes in everywhere, that there's no place that it's not coming in, so there's no safe place to run to, right? So I want to start this morning, as we're going to be talking about integralism, by where else I saw it. And because where it's coming in on the corporate side, it's actually coming in as a religious movement. So what else is happening? Well, first of all, understand that this is an attempt to put the West into a degrowth model, okay? So here's where you would see the future is degrowth, a guide to a world beyond capitalism. In other words, that capitalism doesn't even have anything to do with what's actually going to be happening financially in the future, okay? So this is about net zero and degrowth. Have all of you heard of the terms net zero before? Because it's everywhere, right? I know that in London, where we actually have a lot of our groups and our conferences and so forth, just down the street, very close to actually where 10 Downing Street is the Ministry of Net Zero. It's where Scotland Yard used to be. So we're going to have an entire organization within the British government dedicated to net zero. So is that what's happening in China? Well, they'll say that that's what's happening in China, but that's not what's happening in China. Because China is ascending and the West is on a degrowth trajectory. So you are in the midst of a transition from an economy of abundance where you have DoorDash, where you can actually go and get anything that you want, usually within an hour. Maybe there's some cases where you got to order it on Amazon, you got to wait a day and a half or whatever the case may be. But whatever you want is at your fingertips. And I want you to think about the fact that that's something that the previous administration wanted to make sure that was not the case, right? So if you were a mom and you needed baby formula, that would be a difficult thing to achieve, right? If you were somebody that wanted to have cheap gas so you can make sure that you get back and forth to work, that was something that was hard to achieve. But what's happening with this administration? What's happening where Scott Bessent gets up in front of everyone and says, the era of cheap goods is over, and we're going to impose tariffs on everyone, all right? Everything's going to become more expensive. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Where have you heard that term before? Well, think about it. You heard that term when it came to immigration and the Obama administration and the Biden administration. If you were in Britain, you heard it in previous Tory administrations. You heard it in regards to what's going to happen with COVID. It's going to be bad at first, but we'll get over this. 2 weeks to slow the spread, right? But now you have this administration, and again, I don't think, well, once again, Donald Trump, I believe he's a man with good intentions. But if you think back to his first administration, let me just think about this for a second. He had every intention to keep the country open. He was not going to submit to what every other nation was doing on the China model, right? That he was not going to shut down and close everything. He's like, it's going to blow over and it's going to be done with. And we're going to move forward as a country, right? Who showed up at Mar-a-Lago? Those of you that were sitting around here last night, please don't answer this. But who was it that showed up at Mar-a-Lago? Oh, stop, don't say anything, guys. Who was it that showed up at Mar-a-Lago, drove to it during Kimberly Guilfoyle's birthday party to then get in Donald Trump's face and tell him you're going to lose the presidency, you're going to end up killing millions of people if you don't shut down the country? It was Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is the one that convinced him to shut down the country. So it should have made you a little bit nervous when you saw 2024 and the campaign trail, where there's Tucker Carlson with his hilarious laugh, next to Donald Trump advising him. All of a sudden, you had a situation where J.D. Vance, who were the last three candidates for vice president? Remember? Doug Burgum, who was actually for ESG and DEI. And who else? Marco Rubio. So Marco Rubio was in consideration. Think about Marco Rubio for a second. What economic plan does he actually favor? Not capitalism. He favors inclusive capitalism. The same policy that Elizabeth Warren favors. So inclusive capitalism, call it by whatever name you want, that's distributism. So let's end the free market economy. And then all of a sudden, just a few months ago, you had the State Department of the United States of America putting out a 1-minute ad where Marco Rubio is advocating for the Roman Catholic Church. I need you to think about that for a second. So we were hearing yesterday about how really the United States was formed upon Protestant values and also on the concept of liberty, cognitive liberty, to where the state was not going to take a position in regards to what sort of faith you needed to prescribe to, what sort of liturgy you needed to follow. But Marco Rubio came out with a 1-minute ad from the State Department for the Roman Catholic Church. That should have given everybody a pause for a second. It's like, wait. What's going on here? So you're in the midst of a transformation from an economy of abundance to an economy of scarcity, where you can't necessarily get the things that you want to get at your decision. You decide, I need this. Well, maybe you can't get that. Maybe you need to wait. And in the future, maybe your behavior doesn't allow you to purchase that thing. So that's what's occurring right now. Well, this is a picture in the London School of Economics. It's my friend Glenn Beck. We were leading a tour with him. And what do you see that's actually happening in that picture in regards to the globe? What do you see? The globe is upside down. In the middle of the London School of Economics. Remember that the London School of Economics was actually founded by whom? The Fabians, who were what's across the street from the London School of Economics? The Grand Lodge of Freemasonry. So what you see is that we're going to take a position where the world is turned upside down. We're going to find global equity. That's going to be what we pursue now in the future. So what you're experiencing is a strategy of degrowth. In other words, where we were, now we're going to degrow the economy. So there's a big controversy right now in the Trump administration where they're talking to the folks that are actually reporting the figures of our GDP and everything else, our job growth. And they're saying, hold on a second. You got to make sure your people are getting fired everywhere. Please don't text me in the middle of this. Thank you for the note, though. That's wonderful. Yes, I will talk about that at some point. Thank you. Let me just go ahead and turn this off. But you're experiencing a strategy of degrowth. So to take us where we were at our apex, can you just imagine for a second, go back to 2018 and 2019 during the first Trump administration? Man, we were soaring. Thank you, Donald Trump. We were really going to places. I mean, you could invest in something and know that you're going to get a return. Where are we now? Well, our dollar since April 4th has taken a massive hit. How many of you deal in international currencies or international business here in the room right now? Okay, so you know. If you take a look at the value of the dollar against the euro, against the British pound, against the Swiss franc, holy smokes, we're at lows that we've never seen before. So all of a sudden the dollar is weakening. Our ability to buy things is lessened. At the same time, we're opposing tariffs on other nations. So combined with the tariffs and a weak dollar, when people look at things that are coming in internationally, they're going, oh, I think I'll pass. That's just too much money. Honey, do you see how much this thing's gone up? It's gone up 70% since last year. That's actually happening. But they say, well, the good thing is that American goods are cheaper overseas. Okay, I guess that's a good thing. But our dollar is so weak now. Where do we go from here? And all of a sudden you hear from Scott Bessent, you hear from Howard Lutnick. By the way, I should mention, Scott Bessent, Department of Treasury. Who was he working for? He was the chief information officer for who? George Soros. And Howard Lutnick, his organization, it was a part of what other larger organization for a long time? The World Economic Forum. Interesting how we're kind of doing what the World Economic Forum wanted us to do all the time. To decrease America, to make sure we get away from this concept of unipolar world, where the United States is the dominant country in the entire world. And now move us into what? Now you've heard this terminology from Tucker Carlson in a positive fashion, Alex Jones in a positive fashion, from Elon Musk in a positive fashion. We're moving towards a multipolar world. So all of a sudden, the United States is not the dominant country anymore. We're going to have to share that polarity with whatever other nations. Well, namely, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and the global south. They would say South Africa, but it's turned into the global south. Well, what is that? That's BRICS. So now, where you had an America-dominant model of free market capitalism, now you're going to move into another system that James Lindsay was addressing last night, where it's BRICS that dominates. It's all these massive countries that have 5.1 billion people, if you were to include all of them, in the Belt and Road Initiative. So when Donald Trump says, and this is what his advisors are telling me, look, they need America, right? They want our 380 million people. We're the biggest customer they have. So they're going to have to come to our table and they're going to have to do a deal, right? Well, that might have been the case 10, 15 years ago. But our 380, 400 million people up against 5.1 billion people that are on the ascension right now. Does that work out math-wise? No. Like, okay, yeah, you do whatever you want. And we'll address that in a few minutes. So where do these ideas come from? First of all, from Herbert Marcuse. So when we talk about Herbert Marcuse, we talk about the man that's really responsible for this whole concept of where we're going. This idea of the fact that you can have no enemies to the left, right? And as well now, all of a sudden, he's kind of where you would say, in regards to what's happening on the right, where they're telling you to embrace critical theory, and they're even putting pictures of Herbert Marcuse on their articles from the co-founder of American Reformer, which is supposed to be a right-sided organization, that why you need to still consider critical theory. So these ideas are coming from one-dimensional man, and they're coming from The Limits to Growth by the Club of Rome. Now, a whole bunch of you are saying, Mike, that's a conspiracy theory. No, it's a real organization. And they put out The Limits to Growth. The whole idea back in the late 60s and early 70s that, look, there's only so far that we can grow. So we have limits to this growth, And if we had any additional growth, it could cause some real problems for us in the world. There's only so far that you can grow. So we need to take a look at population. And the growth of humanity is that's the major problem for the world. So all of a sudden in the 70s, the focus was on, well, how many people do we actually have? What is trash and what are our needs for water and so forth? That's a real problem. That's one of the things that the World Economic Forum and the United Nations was actually focused on. So you have a Malthusian concept coming in that we need to limit population. Then all of a sudden, you see all sorts of different policy changes in regards to abortion. You see other, let's say, sexual lifestyles being promoted. And what is the result of those things? The lack of the propagation of humanity. Let's just talk about it. I mean, I'm not trying to go out there and tell you, like, right now you need to make a change in the way you are, and I am a Christian, and I do preach the gospel, but I need you to consider these things from another perspective. Why are these things happening? Well, if you're regarding the fact that population is a big problem, and somehow we have to fix the issue of population, well, then you can kind of see through the filter of what other things are happening in the world right now, right? Okay, so what is degrowth? So from the World Economic Forum, which is, that is the altar of truth that we all need to see our world through, right? So degrowth broadly means shrinking rather than growing economies. So we use less of the world's energy and resources and put well-being ahead of profit. The idea is that by pursuing degrowth policies, economies can help themselves, their citizens, and the planet by becoming more sustainable. See, because we can have capitalism, but it needs to be a sustainable capitalism. In other words, it needs to be a capitalism that has some socialism shoved into it. So what you are experiencing is an attempt to shrink our economic power and transition the United States into the fractured states, not United States, but fractured states of America, and into the economic system known as Distributism. So who's really which is the organization that was promoting Distributism as a concept? Like when you look at Chesterton, the Chester Bullock concepts. Chesterton was of what faith? Catholic. Roman Catholic. Well, where does this come from? Well, it comes from Roman Catholics and Roman Catholic poets are saying, we got a big problem with this whole communism thing. But as well, we've got a big problem with this whole free market capitalism thing. And we need to find a way in between the two that works for everybody. That's where Distributism comes from. Well, so why is America and the West destabilizing and committing economic suicide? Because our world is undergoing a meta-system change. So we're going from a system, think about it. You can order anything from anywhere. Like right now, because I had a really bad car accident, I was hit from behind from a drunk driver back in 2017. I have bad knees. I've had several different, several different things that have been tried on my knees and so forth to try to get them better and so forth. But I have to order Chopat, which is a knee brace that helps to keep my knees together so I can walk, so I can do other things, so it doesn't swell. Well, how long does it take me to get a Chopat that was made in China? About 2 days, right? But let's say that we make that impossible, where I can't, on my own accord, be able to get that knee brace. Or let's say that I can't get the multivitamins that I need. Let's say that I can't get whatever it is that you need. Well, all of a sudden, now we're going back to a time where those things weren't readily available, and also a time when those things weren't cheap. So you're undergoing a meta-system change now. Also a time from where you pretty much could guarantee that you had privacy, right? That only if the federal government or whatever authorities could say, look, we're going to be holding an investigation on you and we need to let you know that this is happening. Well, now everything that you do is measured. Everything. Every conversation that you have, every purchase that you make, that's measured. So you're undergoing a meta-system change. Well, it was decided that China's autocratic system must win, and America's free market economy and individual liberty must end. So this was a conscious choice many decades ago, that what even America was assisting happen in China, that needed to be the system that we all were on. So then what becomes the thing that everybody says, especially in this administration? Well, we have to beat China, and to beat China, we have to become what China is. We have to follow this path with artificial intelligence, with data collection, or else China's going to win. Well, China and the autocratic system that they use is going to win if you decide that you're going to become them. You might as well be invaded because you're doing exactly the same thing. So the world needed a great reset to transition out of capitalism and individual liberty and into a new economic system. And not only a new economic system, but a new system that says, well, your individual liberty is not so important anymore. We, as the central government, need to know where you are at all times, what you're saying at all times, what you're doing at all times. We need to know that. And so one of the ways that they're going to kind of try to cajole you into accepting this is they're going to say, well, God wants this too, you see. Because really, if you were to talk about what's being installed, now I'm Reformed, okay, in other words, that I believe that what John Calvin was saying was true, is that you're really creating an artificial Calvinist God. That's what you're doing. And now all of a sudden, you're all going to become automatons. But that's what God wants. So if that's the case, who would you want to make sure that you control to some extent? Well, you'd want to make sure that you controlled everybody that is in the religious fields. It doesn't matter what denomination, it doesn't matter what faith it is, that everybody's on board with the same thing. So who was the first major world leader to call for a great reset? Don't say it out loud now, folks. A great reset to heal our planet in January of 2020. Do you have any guesses? What was this guy? King Charles. Now notice, he has a crown over his head. What is that crown? It's the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. That's his crown. So this was at the 2020 meeting in January of Davos. We're saying that we have a need for a great reset, to reset our planet and our world. Okay, now he was Prince Charles at the time. Now he's King Charles. Do you see why a monarchy is not a good idea in the United States? So every time that you see Curtis Yarvin saying, well, it's really better if we have a monarchy in our world, it's going to help us do, mumbling whatever he's saying, just shut up. Okay? We have our constitutional republic. You can move someplace else where you have a monarchy. Please feel free, all right? You can even go to Canada, and you can declare your allegiance to the monarchy there. But not in the United States. We have a good system. We have the abundance because of the system that we have. So that was King Charles that said this. And remember that he's been an attendee and a member of the World Economic Forum since its beginning. So the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And basically what you're talking about is taking these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Remember, there's 17 of them. Maybe James will touch on that later. But there's 17 goals of the Sustainable Development Program that bring us to net zero. So who's developing all these 17 Sustainable Development Goals? Well, every corporation that you can think of. And also every religion. And we'll touch on this later. But it's also part of what happened with Laudato Si, which is an encyclical from the Roman Catholic Church that's basically putting the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as dogma in the Roman Catholic Church. And also accepted by the Green Patriarch in Eastern Orthodoxy. So you have both of these major faiths that basically include over 1 billion people. Then, of course, the Protestants are along with it too. That's why you have organizations like the Gospel Coalition and T4G. They're all for it. And for those of you that are Jewish here, a lot of your Jewish leaders embrace the same thing. So it's not one religion that did this, and Islam did this as well. Where you had Yasser Qadi basically touring different TV stations in the Middle East, including Al Jazeera, with Linda Sarsour. Do you remember who Linda Sarsour was? Yeah, she's basically paid by the Open Societies Foundation's George Soros to push for gay rights and trans rights within Islam. And just a few months ago, you had J-Lo in front of the crown princes of Saudi Arabia shaking her rear end. Like them all sitting there in their robes, and here's J-Lo, this upper middle 50s woman, dancing around in front of them. It's like, what is going on here? Well, it's a transition of everything. Everything, everywhere, all at once. Right? And it's happening in all corporations. I can tell you off the top of my head, probably 30 or 40 airports that I was walking through over the past couple of years where you see the Sustainable Development Goals. Right there, the circle. Saying, okay, we're along with this. I saw it on the side of a cruise ship. And I'm on the board of advisors for Celebrity Cruises, and there's a push for that too. Well, why? Why is that the case? Well, King Charles decided unilaterally to supplant the Magna Carta. What is the Magna Carta? What did it do? It said that we as citizens, we as subjects of the king, that we have rights too, that supersede what the king and as well what's decided from the crown are saying. We have basic rights. But he decided to basically supplant the Magna Carta with a new declaration, the Terra Carta. See, because Earth's rights come before your rights. So your rights are second to what the Earth's rights are. So government, corporate, and NGO leaders affiliated with the United Nations, COP28, and now COP30, and the World Economic Forum are dedicated to ensuring that the West commits economic suicide. So wherever you see these world leaders, there you see Boris Johnson. Now, Boris Johnson, of course, is conservative. He's of the Tory party. He would never go down this road, would he? Right? You, of course, see with the World Health Organization, you see Bill Gates. You see, of course, the President of France, Prime Minister of France, I should say. And everything is about the Great Reset and transitioning to these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But you don't see that 17 Sustainable Goals pin on whose lapel. You won't see it on Xi Jinping's because they're not degrowing. They're growing as we degrow. The West is disrupting and dismantling our nations for the sake of climate change, while China and the global South builds and rises. So this is a map. Please feel free to take a photo of this, of the Belt and Road Initiative. And we were kind of brought on between 2009 and 2012. It was actually announced in 2012 that this was the path that China would be following, but they got an early start on this. It was originally called the Silk Road Project. In other words, how do we get all of the production of China to the rest of the world? And so what you'll see is the maritime route as well as the Silk Road route. The maritime route goes south through Singapore and then up through India and as well then through the Middle East and through Africa. Africa is very important in all of this. So imagine if you're a poor African nation and all of a sudden China shows up and said, you know what? You've got terrible roads. You don't have clean water. Your airport is awful. I mean, you can't hardly even land a plane. You have no data centers here. You have no control of your digital cellular technology. What we'll do is this. We're going to come in and we're going to make everything great. It's going to be fantastic. Just need to give us your mineral rights. You don't worry about paying us back anytime soon. And as well, allow us to collect all your data. And that's the Faustian bargain. Is that all of a sudden you have these nations that say, well, we really need this. They go back to their cabinet and they say, this is a great deal. We got to take this. And all of a sudden, you're a colony of China. Who else has done this? Think about some of the conservative leaders that are being propped up now as proof of concept that we should all be like them. Can you think of a few? In 2015, a European nation signed on to the Belt and Road Initiative. What nation was that? It was Hungary and Viktor Orban. See, because Viktor Orban is a puppet of the Chinese Communist Party. When they had the lockdowns for COVID in 2020, and then they came out with the vaccine, where did the vaccine come from that everybody was required to take in Hungary? It came from China. There are Chinese Communist Party police in the streets of Hungary. Hungary is an absolute beautiful, truly, and when you talk about Budapest, but a Potemkin village of China. And of course, they're very strong on immigration, just like China is. China wants to know where everybody is on 100% of the time, all the time. And if you're in China illegally, they will do basically what ICE is doing now. They'll come, drive up, they'll take you and throw you out of the country quickly. So now all of a sudden we're saying, we want to be like China. And that we want to have this heavy authoritarian control. And see, it's not just a question of the citizens doing the bidding of the government. It's also important that the corporations do the bidding of the government. So that's one place. You know another place like in Central America that signed on to the Belt and Road Initiative? El Salvador. Bukele. So when everybody's lifting up and saying, oh, what a great example of how America can be. Yeah, he's on the leash like a dog of the Chinese Communist Party. So if America comes in, like Marco Rubio, and says, you know, we want you to do the same thing for us, does that make it any better? I mean, quite honestly, because we're becoming China, it doesn't make it any better. So just this past year, we had a large event in Athens. And coinciding with those large events, we had a cruise going out of the port of Piraeus, which is the port of Athens. If you drive up to the port of Piraeus, you're coming up to the port, one of the largest ports in all of Europe. What flag is flying from the mast there in front of their port? Is it the Greek flag? No, it's the flag of the Chinese Communist Party. Because they've taken control of the port of Piraeus. So from the port of Piraeus, goods come in, and now you have a railway being constructed from the port of Piraeus into Hungary, where then throughout Central Europe, all Chinese goods can be distributed. So what China is doing is they're continuing to be the factory of the world, and they're going to start distributing their goods everywhere. Within Europe, within South America, within Central America. Did you know that the Mexican government has been working with the Chinese government to start creating launching platforms for satellites in Mexico? This is happening right now. Meanwhile, the United States is saying, oh, yeah, we got to put tariffs on everything. We got to become nationalistic. We got to fix this problem. No, you do. You need to fix the problem. The fact that we have pharmaceuticals that are being produced in China and other places in Europe, we need to produce those things here. We need to produce our own oil. We need to produce our own steel. But you need to go at this slowly because we don't have that capacity yet. So if you're going as hard as you can, I'm sorry, James, I'll pick it up. I'm going very slow. So if you have all of these things being done overseas, how are you going to quickly then create the companies and the jobs for people to come in and do these things that are Americans? They're going to say, yep, I'll sign up for that. I'll take $50,000 a year to put widgets on whatever, or to create the mold for this thing or that thing or whatever the case may be. How does that occur in America like that? Because that's what we're doing. Well, it won't. You see, because you're obsolete. Those jobs aren't going to be coming for Americans. Maybe at first a few. But see, we're moving into the fourth industrial revolution. Those jobs will be filled with robotics. that are empowered by artificial intelligence. That's what this is all about. And all of a sudden, if you have literally millions and millions and millions of people out of work, and there's nothing that they can do, what do you create? Remember, it's not universal basic income. It's conditional basic income. You created the creative class now. This is what Richard Florida was talking about 20 years ago, when he was saying, well, when all this occurs, you're going to have people do something, so they need to be creative on whatever means that means on their social media platforms. So, well, I mean, he's a Marxist, but anyway, but Richard Florida was then interviewed by what religious leader and asked to opine on these things, and where that's a really good plan was Albert Mohler of the Southern Baptist Convention. The Southern Baptist Convention. So maybe you're starting to see what's actually going on here. So China is basically becoming what the United States was in the 1950s and 60s. Remember the Marshall Plan? Well, now we have the Great Reset. So remember what happened in 2020. In 2020, what shut down? All of a sudden you couldn't get things, right? All free trade was shut down because we couldn't get ships into ports. We didn't have port workers or truckers that could work on those things because a lot of them were refusing to get the shot. I have to be careful here because I want to make sure that YouTube allows this video to go out. But so all of a sudden you had this issue where you couldn't get baby formula, you couldn't get the things that you wanted, you had some other trade deals that were made, but also there was a problem with all these longshoremen and with all the truckers. And now you're seeing right now that, oh my gosh, we're using Indian truckers or people from other countries, and man, they're creating traffic accidents and deaths. What do you think the next answer to that is going to be? Well, Tesla, can you make a car for us that can be driverless, that won't make mistakes like these Indian truckers? Because remember this, Pete Buttigieg, this is going back to 2021 and 2022, he came out and said, we will have net zero automobile deaths and traffic accidents by 2030. Well, how does that occur? Does it mean that we're all going to be in driver's school and become better drivers? So then what does the Trump administration come out and say in regards to Tesla and what they're creating there? Well, by 2030, we're not going to have any deaths on the road anymore. So what's happening is the crazy, insane, I can't use the word I want to use, but the crazy, insane concepts and policies of the Biden administration are now in the Trump administration, but they're being accelerated fast to where you see the tech lords coming before America on the second day of the presidency and saying, well, what we really need to have is mRNA vaccines for everything, for everybody. And it's going to be personalized for you, and artificial intelligence is going to be in charge. And everybody's like looking at this like horrified, like, I can't believe this. All of a sudden, Elon Musk is bringing his team into the federal government, and they're getting rid of all sorts of different agencies and saying, well, we're in charge now. And you're digitizing the federal government of the United States. Well, yeah, USAID, which by the way, I think I might have been the first person back in 2017 to warn everybody about what was happening with USAID. USAID was basically funding the woke movements in America, especially through faith and NGOs. They were the ones supplying the money. So when people would come to you, Mike, who's paying for all this woke left stuff that's happening in all the different religious organizations? And I said, well, you are. What? Yeah, you are. It's your tax dollars at work. That's what USAID is. So you have this occurring. We are disrupting and dismantling our form of governance while China is growing their footprint. I hope you can see that. So China is dominating. The European car makers are having a real problem right now. You know why? Because electric Chinese cars are flooding the market, and they're low priced. So Volkswagen's like, I don't think we can keep up anymore. You know, Audi's like, I don't know if we can keep on doing this because they're selling their car for $25,000, and we have to start at $40,000. So that's what's happening. Flooding everything with cheap goods. So, let me just give you an example. Hopefully it's loud enough here. And this will give you an example of what the Belt and Road Initiative is from a positive viewpoint. Now, what I want you to listen for is what they refer to this, that this is a golden age for China in what's going to be happening. So who else is using that term? Well, the Trump administration. Because it's not going to be a golden age for America. It's going to be a golden age for China.
What you need to know about China's Belt and Road Initiative in 3 minutes. China's Belt and Road Initiative is a foreign policy and economic strategy of China where the two ends of Eurasia, as well as Africa and Oceania, are economically linked to China, along with the Silk Road Economic Belt and Maritime Silk Road. It emphasizes 5 key areas of cooperation: coordinating development policies, forging infrastructure and facilities networks, strengthening investment and trade relations, enhancing financial cooperation, deepening social and cultural exchanges. China's Belt and Road Initiative completion is planned to coincide with the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic of China in 2049. About 50 Chinese state-owned companies have invested in nearly 1,700 Belt and Road Initiative projects since 2013. China's Belt and Road Initiative currently consists of 6 economic corridors: China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, Bangladesh-China-India-Myanmar Economic Corridor, BCIM, the New Eurasia Land Bridge Economic Corridor, NELB, the China-Mongolia-Russia Economic Corridor, CMREC, China-Central Asia-West Asia Economic Corridor, CCWAEC, China-Indochina Peninsula Economic Corridor, CIC-PEC, and 2 financial institution initiatives, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, Silk Road Fund. Why would China's Belt and Road Initiative drive China to greatness? It places China in the economic political orbit of many Asian and European powers. This provides China with a political hold over land and possibly the maritime routes. It acts as a link between economic and political partnerships in the region, and since China is now the #1 trading partner in the region, the trading partners of China have to be more sensitive towards its political interests. China can establish soft power by establishing the Belt and Road Initiative through building infrastructure and harnessing connections in untapped markets in the partnering countries. It is based on China's historical narrative of the Golden Age, which consisted of the ancient Silk Road and maritime routes. If China's Belt and Road Initiative succeeds, it would drive China's return to greatness. Trade will expand by $2.5 trillion and connect the world's 3 largest labor forces: China, India, and ASEAN. This is what you need to know about China's Belt and Road Initiative.
So you put all of this under kind of one of those happy corporate tracks of music. Doesn't it sound great? So now China can exercise soft power over the entire world because they're their major trading partner, their major economic partner. So now China's going to tell you what to do. So it's going to have an effect on your votes. It's going to have an effect on what you do as a nation. Do you understand the environment in which we're talking into right now? So when you talk about what's happening with the woke movement, what's happening with the woke right movement right now, what's happening with all this anti-Semitism? And what you have to understand is this. The Roman term for what they're doing right now in terms of what they would understand that you need to do to prepare an area before invasion was divide et impera. Divide et impera. DEI. So you divide and then you conquer. So you create tension within a nation that you want to invade. You set everybody against one another. You tell them all that the only safe place for them to be is someplace else from where they are. Maybe you can't live in New York anymore. Maybe you can't live in California anymore if you're Jewish. Maybe the only safe place for you to live is Israel. You Christians, because of what's happening with the LGBTQ hate, you can't live in all these other places. You need to come to somehow the Appalachian territories that have now been bought, and we're creating Christian, specifically Christian territories and communities for you to move into, because you'll be safe there. We're going to, remember it was Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone? Remember that back in 2020? Where they took over that area in Seattle? They said, this is our safe space, and we're autonomous, right? So Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, well, now you're creating Christian Hillbilly Autonomous Zone. And this is where you all can live. Because remember where this whole concept really came up from. Well, hillbilly elegy. J.D. Vance, who traded in his flannel shirt for a blue suit and a red tie. I'm a Republican now, right? And now he's elected, and now he's basically coming out with ideas that would favor an autocratic form of governance. Isn't that amazing? But he's going to somehow anoint it with Christianity and say, see, it's what God wants us to do. So you have all the LGBTQ plus people saying, all these other zones where Christians are and Muslims are, that's not safe for us. So we've got to go to this place, maybe Northern California, let's say. And this is where we have to have our own LGBTQ plus nation. And Muslims are saying, we have to go to our own spaces where we can be safe and do what we want to do and have all of our parades and our other things where we're declaring our faith, right? We need to do that. We got to go to our own autonomous zones. And all the Latinos are saying, well, we need some safe place that we can go, like La Raza, the race, where we can be safe from all these whites and all these blacks, and then as well all these LGBTQ people that are trying to enforce their morals on us. We've got to go to some place too. The the indigenous people of America, they're saying we have to go to our spaces as well. We already have our spaces. You see, you're on borrowed land right now. So all of a sudden what you do is you shatter America to bits. And you turn us against one another. And then that allows nations like China and the Belt and Road Initiative to become utterly dominant. And you have people that are whispering in Donald Trump's ear saying, what you really need to do is you need to put out a tweet about Michaelmas and St. Michael the Archangel. That'll really get a lot of people supporting what you're doing. And a lot of Protestants are like, what? What did Donald Trump just put out? I mean, this is a strictly Roman Catholic thing coming from Pope Leo XIII. Isn't that interesting? Pope Leo XIII, who wrote or composed Rerum Novarum, which really was one of the main encyclicals that defined integralism, which is the reason why Pope Bob took the name Pope Leo XIV, because he's going to continue the mission of Pope Leo XIII. Integralism. Just happens to come from Chicago. Spent a lot of time in South America. By the way, he will reverse nothing from Pope Francis and all the idiotic Marxist garbage that he introduced into the Roman Catholic Church. He will reverse nothing. And everybody's talking about, well, we got a new pope. You see, he's not like Pope Francis. Really? You don't think? You don't think that he embraced some Ferrarian concepts? You don't think that he was bowing at the altar of Domhalder Camara? So this is all for global equity. The resources of the West will be redirected to China and the South, while the West is plunged into economic disparity and feudalism. Technofeudalism is coming. So how many nuclear power plants are being built in the United States over the past 5 years? 1. around Georgia, South Carolina, etc. Of course, many more are now being talked about being built. Are they being built for you? No. They're being built for data centers, for artificial intelligence, not for you. So your power bill will continue to go up. How many nuclear power plants are being built in China right now? 57. Not to mention about 300 coal plants. You see, they're going to have cheap energy. They're going to have cheap energy for artificial intelligence. They're going to have cheap energy for the people as well. At least the people that are obeying what the state tells them to believe. So, a growth economy, we go up like a roller coaster, right? So it says, an increase in production and consumption to grow profit for private owners by privatizing the benefits and socializing the losses in the spirit of enhancing well-being for the selected few. Well, it's not for the selected few. You're not selected. You're not predetermined that you're going to live this life. That's up to you to work hard, to be innovative, that we're in a meritocratic system. What happens in a degrowth economy? A reduction of production and consumption to lighten the ecological footprints planned democratically in a spirit of social justice while improving well-being. So now we're going to go down for the sake of social justice, so we can all be equally poor. So as opposed to an economy of abundance, we're in an economy of scarcity. So then we enter into a post-growth economy, a steady state economy in harmony with nature, where decisions are taken together and where wealth is equitably shared in order to prosper without growth. Prosper. What do you mean prosper? Oh, that you get your daily rations? You have some water? Maybe you have a little heat in the winter? Maybe some AC, but not all the time in the summer? And that you can still just live in the creative class because you don't have a job anymore. There's no place for you to really succeed. Those of you that are journalists, you don't need to write articles anymore, right? Because artificial intelligence will just tell people what they need to believe. Those of you that are actors, you don't need to act anymore. We got VO3, VO4, VO5, VO6, whatever. Those of you that are paralegals, we don't need you anymore. Those of you that are attorneys, oh man, that's such a thing. That's like 2019, man. Because now we can take a contract that someone's going to sign and we can review it in like 0.5 milliseconds and make all the changes that need to be made in your agreements. You know, as a matter of fact, you don't even need to be voting anymore because artificial intelligence knows who's the better candidate at this point. They also know all the things that those candidates actually were up to in the last few years. So they know this is the person that should actually be sort of performatively in charge. Of course, it'll favor whatever happens with artificial intelligence. The path to degrowth will be gradual over the next 6 years and will eventually conclude in a circular economy. So yes, it looks like a toilet drain. Yes, going to a circular bioeconomy. This is something that I heard about in 2011 for the first time. Is that this is what we're going into as a circular economy. So no longer would you buy a cell phone like every year or 2 years. I got to get the latest, right? I got to have the 100 megapixel camera or whatever the case may be, right? No, you have the same piece of equipment, but it's just improved from year to year. So in other words, innovation basically starts to become to a screeching halt after a while. We will innovate as the state decides that we're going to innovate. The end of open travel and freedom of movement. And this is something that I know a lot about. This is the industry that I'm in. So what you're seeing right now is the Fires UK document. And if you can't see what it says from 2020 to 2029, road vehicles, development of petrol, diesel engine ends, any new vehicle introduced from now on must be compatible with absolute zero. Not just net zero, but absolute zero. 23 to 2049. Remember, what's 2049, by the way? That's the 100th anniversary of the formation of the Chinese Republic, Chinese Communist Party. So all new vehicles, electric average size of cars reduces to 1,000 kilograms. Okay? So you come to this point where everything declines. Look at flying, 2020 to 2029. All airports except Heathrow, Glasgow, and Belfast closed with transfers by rail. So you don't have an airport in Edinburgh anymore. You don't have an airport in Manchester anymore. This is for the UK. And then from 23 to 2049, all remaining airports close. And everything's just connected by rail. So when you're talking about travel, if any of you are going, man, I'd really like to see Switzerland someday, or to go to France, I suggest you do it soon. Because traveling is going to be based upon your behavior. And whether or not you have the carbon credits or the ability to actually travel. Because it'll be a plus or minus achievement way of doing things. So, American Airlines has purchased 60 boom supersonic jets to fly their intercontinental and transatlantic routes. These net zero SS jets will seat between 45 and 60 passengers. That's interesting, isn't it? Meanwhile, while this is happening, what's happening with our largest air maker in the United States? Well, we don't have McDonnell Douglas anymore, right? That's gone. We don't have Lockheed really producing commercial jets anymore. Who's the only one producing commercial jets? Boeing. So what have you seen over the past 3 or 4 years? Critical Boeing theory. So every toilet that malfunctions, every seatbelt that is crusty, it gets reported, right? And you see it in national news. Boy, you don't want to fly Boeing. That's a problem. If Boeing's commercial side goes down, what's the other side of Boeing? Military. So what has happened since that time is that over the past 25 years, China told Boeing, if you want to sell airplanes in our country, you have to give us all of the design units for how you built the 737, the 787, the 767, and so forth. Well, now what do you have? You have COMAC. You have the Chinese air maker, the building of the planes, that is now beginning to sign contracts all over the world to produce their planes that are exact replicas of 737s and 787s. So China will replace America as the dominant supplier of commercial aircraft. Maybe it's starting to make sense to you right now what's happening. Well, don't believe me. What I'm saying is that only the ultra-rich will be able to travel, the ultra-high net worth people. Believe the World Economic Forum and this gentleman.
People of means who are going to travel, and then there's going to be people maybe who of lesser means who might actually be able to use an Oculus or a Magic Leap or some other kind of device to travel to the same place, but from their own couch. But in many ways, it's actually going to create even more distance between those two people. That psychologically, and I think that we've experienced this through social media. In many ways, it's brought people closer in certain ways, but actually created this remarkable divide because it's even more visible, actually, the divide in certain ways.
So, the ultra-wealthy will be able to travel on boom supersonic jets, but all the rest of us, we can put on an Oculus headset, and we can travel there virtually. Oh, isn't this great? I'm in Ireland, or I'm in Sicily at Terra Mita. Oh, look, it's Mount Etna right there. I can almost smell it. No, I can't. But it's almost like I'm actually there. So what you're being sold is a simulacrum of reality. And what those ultra-high net worth individuals, those that have invested in this entire transition, they'll be able to do anything that they want. See, because we had over-tourism for a while. Oh, those people that are in Venice. Oh, those people. I've seen them too, but what created over-tourism? What was the one market that exploded from about 2008 to 2020? That, everywhere, like with selfie sticks and everything, and just like I can't even get through this. Like if you went to Lucerne, Switzerland, the dominant population of Lucerne, Switzerland on an average day was not Swiss. It was Chinese. Flooding the market. Destroying the market. And obviously, I'm married. My wife is Chinese. I love her dearly. that whole side of my family, I love them. I'm half Cuban. This isn't about ethnicity. This is about a nation who plans on dominating the world, flooding every market and taking it over. The automobile market, the travel market, the economic market, everything to flood it and be able to basically be the dominant player. Okay. The cruise industry will build smaller capacity net zero cruise ships, while their larger capacity ships will be redistributed to Asia and the global south. Like, Mike, what are they going to do with Miami and Port Canaveral and Fort Lauderdale? Those are massive cruise ships. Well, yeah, a lot of those ships are going to go to Asia. But a lot of those ships that are to still be in America will be ported in Fort Lauderdale, Miami. But what will they do? They're just going to cruise out and they're going to go to their own private islands. See, because we have to make sure that we measure the impact on St. Thomas or St. Martin, because any one day you can have 30,000 people coming in from cruise ships into those islands. See, because you want to make sure that those islands can't be economically independent anymore. So those cruise ships almost need to be a destination into themselves, with water slides and ice skating rinks and giant parks in the middle of the ships. If you haven't been on one of Royal Caribbean ships, you'd be amazed. You'd also be amazed at the amount of people that are on board with you. But that's what you're going to get. So only the small ships will be able to actually have those kinds of experiences. Small ships that maybe have 700 people on board that are ultra luxury, that, for a 7-day cruise, you need to pay starting rates about $14,000. Well, many of you can't do that. Well, that's the point. So we're going to move into a golden age of travel. The hotel industry will begin to set limits to meetings and events and encourage net zero virtual meetings. I'm thinking, why would they do that? Oh, no. You can ask Kathy Kang, who's outside there, and myself, who've been at IMEX and IBTM for the past 10 years, been pushing for everyone to have smaller meetings with less of an impact on what's actually happening within the area that we're coming into. As a matter of fact, we need to get rid of buffets, only plated meals now. And the plated meals, all the food needs to be actually sourced within 50 miles. We need to reduce the food miles that are there. Well, why are they doing that? They're trying to disrupt free trade. That's why. You're thinking, but Mike, really, you're going to have fresher food. It's going to be, oh yeah, I get that. That's not why they're doing it. They're doing it to disrupt free trade. Where some luxury hotel companies that I work with are saying this is the only way we can do it. No, you can't have guacamole because we can't grow that here. We don't have the avocados to be able to make it. Well, there's no beef farms within 100 miles of here. So it's going to have to be chicken or fish. That's your only choice, sorry. No, really, that's where we're going. Now think about what's actually happening. Hotels will also obey ESG requirements for sustainable goods. So what does this look like? Well, this is from the Ritz-Carlton Laguna in California. So our commitment to sustainability. Now, Mike, what does this have to do with integralism? Really? This is silly. Mike, you're taking us all over the map here. Well, what are all the hotels and all the cruise lines and all the travel companies doing? If you go on any of their websites, any of them, you're going to see their commitment to sustainability. Well, why is that? Because it's a religious dogma. It's like if you were looking on your laptop, you're coming into a new area. Let's say you're going into Phoenix or Dallas, whatever the case may be. I want to find a church that I want to worship at on Sunday, or I want to find a synagogue that I want to worship at, on whatever day it may be. So you're going to look online. You're going to say, okay, what are their statement of beliefs? And maybe if you're looking at a church and you're going, oh, these guys are wacky. I don't want to go there. I want to go here. Their commitment is to the infallibility of Scripture. Their commitment is to justification by faith alone. Okay, that's where I want to go. What do you think they're doing here? That's their statement of faith. So travel companies are putting out their statement of faith. And then when other organizations, corporate organizations, are looking to have their meetings at that hotel or on that cruise ship, that as well are having to obey their statement of faith in their company, Because you go on almost any company website, what do you see? Our commitment to sustainability, or ESG, or DEI. So now they're saying, I want to actually do business with a hotel or a cruise line or whatever that has my beliefs, that what's important to us as a company. Because if I don't do these things, I can't get that loan to continue my business next year. Because that's how business works. Because the banks are requiring us to do these things. Integralism. In other words, what you're doing is you're creating a faith-based, top-down way of doing things. That says, I must believe these things, I must do these things, and you coerce behaviors. That's what you do. And a lot of the people that are at these hotels, that are at these cruise lines, they're good people. They don't know what the heck is going on. But when I'm sitting in, sorry, this is insider information, I won't say, but I'm sitting inside of a major cruise corporation's meetings that they're having on a quarterly basis. And they're saying, well, in our commitment to net zero, we're going to come out with the first net zero cruise ship by 2030. Everybody's like, yay! I don't care. I mean, you know that you're reducing your plastic and you're reducing this and you're going to make sure that it doesn't run on fuel and it's going to get stalled out in the middle of the ocean. You know, I mean, I don't care. You know, and that all your food is going to be terrible. You know, that's not important to me. What's important to me is good service, right? A clean, well-maintenanced ship with good room and a shower that I could actually get into, you know? That's what, good service. That's what we're all looking for. But no, it's got to be about sustainability. Because you have to understand that what's more important than what you want personally, individually, in terms of your own liberty, that's not what's important. What's important is the common good. So the common good is that we must be sustainable. That's where all of this ties in. So, we have a pretty good example of this. So we're reducing all single-use plastics because plastics are made out of petroleum products. So we got to get rid of that. So now you have to have whomever your maid is. I mean, mine is my room attendant is Melissa. So when she comes in and blah, 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 you know, how do you know that that is what she's actually putting in? And the hotel said, we can't get this. So we're going to put this thing in instead. You don't know. You don't know if somebody came in before you that was in the hotel room that decided to play a joke on you and put something else inside of there that mixes whatever they put in. This has been my whole complaint for the past 9 years. It's like, let's not do this. No, let's continue to do whatever you want to make it out of, aluminum, whatever. But let's not do this. No, well, we have to do it. Why do you have to do it? Because if we don't do it, we'll lose a star off of our rating. And you're threatened to do it. Like the 5-star hotels in Paris. Oh no, you have to have giant jugs like a 1-star hotel in your room. You can't have individual amenities. Coercing behaviors. Because religious dogma must be followed. And if not, then you'll pay the price. It's almost like we have an inquisition going on. So the hotel industry is being turned into government housing in many cities across the world for migrants, sending ADRs, that's average daily rates, spiraling to unsustainable levels and destroying middle-class tourism. The UK, Ireland, Germany, Italy, Spain, all of California, New York City, Chicago, Seattle are suffering. So if you try to get a hotel room, let's say in Killarney, Ireland, well, I can't get a 1-star hotel, can't get a 2-star hotel. As a matter of fact, I can't even get a 3-star hotel. All I have are 4- and 5-star hotels, and those rates are compressed because you can't travel there without being in a 4- or 5-star hotel, which means that those rates are going to skyrocket to unsustainable levels. So I run a tour company that I can only now get hotel rooms that are in the $1,000 range per night, US dollars. Well, and also my dollar is crashing, so For me to get a British pound or a euro, it's $1.20, or in a UK pound, it's $1.35. So my value is even less, so the price even goes up more. So what happens? Travel bottoms out. So that lower middle income traveler, and even middle upper income traveler doesn't come anymore. So it doesn't just affect the hotels. The hotels are getting money, they're getting subsidies from the federal government to be able to hold the migrants in their hotels. So what does that mean? I'm not even to the integralist part yet, by the way. So I promise I'll cut it off and I'll combine my presentations. But so what that means is that all of a sudden you have pubs and gift shops and sweater shops and places where you can get all sorts of little touristy things and maybe Royal Connemara marble. Those shops in Killarney, they don't have any customers anymore. Maybe those restaurants that were filled with tourists for the past 60 years, they don't have any customers anymore. And I've actually been to this place. This is one of the reasons I use this. This is Dirty Nelly's in Bunratty, County Clare. And in this castle, they would have the show and a dinner every night. And this was the first international travel that I had when I was 14 years old. When my abuela and abuelo, who were Cuban Irish, that's weird, I don't want to even go into it. But this is our first stop that we had that night, was at Dirty Nelly's in Bunratty. I don't have any tourists anymore because tourists can't afford to go. And we're destroying what was the old system, what was a system that brought abundance to everywhere. And they want to talk about the post-World War II liberal consensus and so forth. No, capitalism, free market capitalism, brought abundance to places that never saw abundance previously, that still hadn't really recovered from the potato famine. And all of a sudden, you've got tourists that can't wait to go and experience Ireland. They can't afford to go anymore. And so, Dirty Nelly's ends up having to close. And maybe the local pub that I've been going to for decades and decades, where you could go and sit down and have an Irish stew and then listen to amazing local musicians come in every night at 7 to 11 p.m. and just play freely. I mean, it was awesome. Well, now they need to close too because they can't afford to stay open. You see, I mean, just even the power, the electricity to stay open, that's gone up like 300%. And tourists aren't coming anymore, so we got to close. It's not sustainable anymore. We're destroying our world, disrupting and dismantling our world. And we're going to turn it into something else. So even though you might want to travel, maybe you can't. You can't travel. Why? Because you need to stay in your technofeudalist region, where everything that you really need to survive is within 15 minutes. We can call them, instead of 15-minute cities, in the Trump administration, we can call them freedom cities. But they're the same thing. It's no different. So all the things you were horrified to hear from the Biden administration, from the World Economic Forum. So you hear Yuval Harari say, we need to get the implant in the skin. We need to know these things that you're saying at all times, at all places. We need to basically make the entire world molecularly part of the Internet of Things. You're like, oh my gosh, we can't do that. I'm voting for Trump. Second day of the Trump administration, he rolls in all the tech bros. And all of a sudden, we're off to the races. We got to beat China. Oh, and Elon Musk developed Neuralink to make sure that it would connect to Starlink. to ensure that you are 24/7 always in the right frame of mind, because it's within the minds of men that peace actually occurs. See, it's just like putting on the mind of Christ if you're a Christian. We're told if you repent of your sins and you trust in Christ for your salvation and bury yourself in His holy word and develop the mind of Christ through the Holy Scriptures, that's what will bring you peace. It will be your guide. Oh, we don't even need that anymore, because you can download that in your mind quickly. But maybe we'll change a few things and make sure that you're obedient and we coerce your behaviors. The Sustainable Development Goals. It's a big part of what's actually happening. So let's hear what King Charles has to say. This was released in, I believe, April of 2020. And so he's trying to put a positive spin on things.
We have an incredible opportunity to create entirely new sustainable industries, investing in nature as the true engine of our economy.
The current global crisis has disrupted every aspect of our lives, but it has also presented us with an extraordinary opportunity, a chance to reset and accelerate efforts to improve the state of our world.
Changing our current trajectory will require bold and imaginative action, together with determination and decisive leadership. In order to secure our future and to prosper, we need to evolve our economic model, putting people and planet at the heart of global value creation. If there is one critical lesson we have to learn from this crisis, we need to put nature at the heart of how we operate. We are on the verge of catalytic breakthroughs that will alter our view of what is possible and profitable within the framework of a sustainable future. We need nothing short of a paradigm shift, one that inspires action at revolutionary levels and pace. We simply cannot waste any more time. The only limit is our willingness to act. And the time to act is now.
See, I played this video at a conference in late 2020 in Florida. I don't know, how many of you live in Florida? Okay, so one of you is blessed. So we opened in Florida in May of 2020. Ron DeSantis got in front of everybody, it's just not working. I don't see any of the deaths that they're talking about. None of that's happened. We're just going to go ahead and open up, just ask you to be responsible. And we opened up in May of 2020. And everybody else stayed locked down. We went to the beach, we did things, we went out to dinner. We were told, though, that when we went into dinner, into a restaurant, we could walk, we had to keep our masks on. And then when we sat down, we could take our masks off and eat. But if we stood up and walked through the restaurant, we had to put, because you see, the virus is not as communicable when you're sitting down and eating, but it is when you're standing and going to the restroom. And just magic formulas and things going out, right? So anyway, once again, how does this end? With the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and as well, this understanding that He is sovereign, right? So this is where we're going with things. It's pretty crazy, I know, and it doesn't seem to make any sense. But let me tell you about something as we close, and then we'll start the rest of our discussion of this in the afternoon, when we really go in deep to what's actually happening. What you are experiencing is an attempt to shrink our economic power and transition the United States into the fractured states of America and into the economic system known as distributism. Because it's not going to be based on your good choices in terms of what you invest in, or on your merit and how hard you work, or in the company that you have that's excelling, or how far you've actually gone up in your career. No, because that's not necessary anymore. You just need to be obedient. You need to obey. What do you think 2020 was about anyway? Well, 2020, to a good extent, of course, was about eliminating free market capitalism. But just like you'd take your dog to obedience school, you were taken to obedience school. That's what it was about. So now you need to be obedient. You see, they don't need Jeffrey Epstein's island anymore to control people. We're all on Jeffrey Epstein's island now, because Epstein's island is now Palantir. That's where we are. And with that, I will close, and we'll start later on this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time and your attention.